All right, settle in because you won't believe the whirlwind that was Amelia Hayes' life. At 40, she'd never have guessed her perfectly sculpted world would crack wide open. To the outside eye, she had it all: a swanky penthouse overlooking Central Park, a calendar brimming with elite social gatherings, and a husband, Julian, a celebrated cardiac surgeon. Everyone envied her, whispered about her luck, but behind that glittering facade lay a secret ache, a profound solitude. Julian, her husband, had become more of a fleeting presence than a partner. His endless surgeries and jet-setting to international conferences meant his returns home were as rare as a blue moon. Their conversations dwindled to hurried exchanges about work schedules and bills. Then came a quiet afternoon in late spring. Sunlight streamed softly into the living room as Amelia's phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Emergency surgery. Home very late, don't wait up. It was the same old story, a soundtrack to her days. With a sigh, she placed the phone down, the familiar question echoing in her mind. When would this gnawing emptiness finally end? Just then, the doorbell chimed, slicing through her thoughts. On the doorstep stood Liam Turner, Julian's younger brother, fresh off the plane from Los Angeles after wrapping up his latest documentary. Liam, with his slightly tousled dark hair, those intensely thoughtful eyes, and broad shoulders beneath a well-worn leather jacket, flashed her a warm smile. New York's as chaotic as ever, huh? Amelia managed a weary smile, but Liam's arrival was like a sudden burst of sunshine in her hushed, lonely apartment. Welcome home, Liam, she said, and as he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The heavy silence that usually clung to the place seemed to dissipate. Liam always had this quiet yet magnetic energy, gentle but deeply observant. Moments later, just as Amelia was pouring coffee, a voice boomed from the doorway. Did anyone miss this handsome mug? She turned to see Dylan Vance, Julian's closest friend. Dylan looked different, a touch more rugged than she remembered. His hair was a little wild, his eyes sparkled with mischief behind dark sunglasses, and he sported a cool, faded jacket. Dylan, Amelia laughed, rushing to embrace him. I thought you were still painting the town red in Paris. Dylan just shrugged, a wide grin spreading across his face. Paris got dull. New York's where the heart is. He plopped onto a nearby chair, and it looks like my timing's impeccable. Where's that coffee? Dylan was always a whirlwind of easygoing charm, as if no time had passed at all. In that suddenly cozy room, Amelia felt a flicker of warmth she hadn't experienced in years. They talked for hours, Dylan recounting his Parisian escapades, Liam animatedly describing his film project. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amelia felt a spark of life rekindle within her. She couldn't predict what lay ahead, but in that moment she knew Liam and Dylan's unexpected arrival had irrevocably altered the course of her life. As twilight painted the city in hues of gold, Liam leaned back in his chair, his gaze pensive as he watched the city lights begin to twinkle through the large window. Dylan sat opposite him, a relaxed smile playing on his lips as he tapped his fingers to the soft jazz drifting from a corner speaker. Amelia, Liam began, his voice gentle, breaking the comfortable silence. Have you ever thought about dusting off those writing skills? Liam's question was like a soft nudge to a long dormant part of her. Before marrying Julian, Amelia had been a respected journalist, her articles on New York's vibrant culture and its people known for their sharp insight. But life as Julian's wife had meant setting it all aside, becoming the picture of wifely perfection. She chuckled, a hint of bitterness lacing her laughter. You really think I could string a worthwhile sentence together after years of just existing in this gilded cage? Liam didn't respond immediately, his eyes holding a patient understanding. You have a universe of stories inside you, Amelia. That's what truly matters. Dylan raised an eyebrow, injecting his characteristic levity into the moment. I second Liam, but I think you need more than just writing. You need to live a little. When was the last time you even tapped your foot to a beat? Amelia laughed, shaking her head. Dylan always had a way of making things feel lighter, yet his words resonated deeply, echoing in the quiet corners of her heart. As the clock struck 9, Dylan suddenly stood up. Come on, let's put on some real music. We can't just sit here all night like statues. Before Amelia could object, he strode over to the sound system and queued up an infectious jazz tune. Turning back to her, he extended a hand. a mischievous glint in his eyes. "A great song begs to be danced to, Amelia. Come on." She laughed, shaking her head, but Dylan's infectious enthusiasm was irresistible. She placed her hand in his, and they began to sway across the floor. Dylan spun her around with surprising grace, and a genuine laugh bubbled up from Amelia as she felt his strong yet gentle hands guiding her. Liam, who had been quietly observing, suddenly rose and walked towards her, placing a hand gently on her waist. "You weren't planning on having all the fun without me, were you?" His smile was soft, but his eyes held a deep intensity. Dylan chuckled. "Smooth moves, Liam. Didn't know you had it in you." Amidst the laughter and the music, Amelia felt enveloped by these two men, so different yet strangely complementary. Dylan, with his humor and boundless energy, was pulling her out of the shadows, while Liam, calm and thoughtful, made her feel truly seen, as if he understood every unspoken pain she had buried. In their arms, her heart began to beat a little faster with each note of the music. The glances they exchanged made her feel like she was dissolving into that moment, a space filled only with music, laughter, and an emotion she hadn't dared to hope for. As the song mellowed into a gentler rhythm, Liam leaned closer and whispered in her ear, "Amelia, I've never seen you smile like this." Dylan, pulling her closer from behind, murmured softly, "And you look so alive. Do you even know how radiant you are when you let yourself go?" Amelia felt overwhelmed, her senses reeling, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from them. Their words were like a mirror reflecting a part of herself she had forgotten during the long years of her marriage. Caught between them, she felt both adrift and strangely anchored. A part of her wanted to retreat, to cling to the familiar, but a quiet voice within whispered, "Why not live for yourself? Just this once?" That night, Amelia knew a new chapter had begun, a turning point from which there was no return. The soft jazz still filled the room, but the melody was fading, replaced by the sound of slow, steady breaths in the dimly lit space, illuminated by the city's glow. Liam stood directly in front of her, his deep eyes searching hers as if he could see straight into her soul. His hands gently held her arms, the warmth of his skin spreading like a slow burn, making her tremble. "You know," Liam whispered, his voice low and tender, "I've always hoped for the day you'd truly embrace your own happiness." Before she could respond, Dylan stepped closer from behind, his hand resting firmly yet subtly on her shoulder. "Amelia," Dylan murmured near her ear, his warm breath caressing her neck, sending shivers down her spine, "you don't have to be afraid anymore. Just trust what you feel." Amelia closed her eyes, trying to quell the rising tide of emotion, but when she opened them again, all she saw were Liam's tender eyes and Dylan's half-teasing, half-understanding smile. Liam leaned in slowly, his face so close she could feel his breath on her cheek. She wanted to step back, to hold on to reason, but her heart whispered that it was too late. Liam's kiss was soft as a whisper, yet it ignited a fire within her. His lips gentle but carrying a fierce longing he had held captive for too long. Time seemed to cease. From behind, Dylan moved closer, wrapping his arms around her like a protective embrace, a silent affirmation. She felt his strong chest press against her back, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat mirroring the chaotic drumming of her own. "Amelia?" Dylan's warm voice resonated in her ear like a comforting lullaby. He bent down and placed a soft kiss on her hair. She no longer knew what was right or wrong, only that in this moment she felt utterly herself, a woman overflowing with the need to live and be loved. Liam's hand slid from her arm down to her waist, his touch both tender and possessive, as if claiming her for this moment. Dylan remained behind her, his breath steady but laced with desire as it brushed the nape of her neck, awakening every nerve. "Liam," Amelia gasped. Dylan leaned in again, whispering near her ear, "We only live once, Amelia." With every emotion crashing over her, she turned to face them both, the last vestiges of her carefully constructed walls crumbling completely. She had crossed a line she never thought she would. Liam's fingers tangled in her hair, drawing her closer into a deep, lingering kiss. Dylan gently traced his hand along her shoulder, his eyes shining as if he were etching every second of this moment into his memory. In that instant, it wasn't just physical closeness. It was something deeper, a rare connection of souls, a harmony that resonated between the three of them. Everything else faded away. leaving only the sound of their ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of her heart in the quiet room. Their warmth enveloped her, making her forget every rule, every fear she had ever clung to. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the raw emotions she had buried for so long. Each breath, each heartbeat, was an echo reverberating through her chest. Tonight, there were no limits left. When the room finally stilled, Amelia rested her head on Liam's shoulder, her eyes half open, gazing at the glittering New York skyline. Dylan leaned in and placed a soft kiss on her forehead, and they all knew there was no turning back. The room fell silent, save for the slow notes of jazz drifting like a gentle breeze. The city lights outside the glass windows cast soft, golden glimmers, twinkling like lost stars, but Amelia saw only the two men beside her. "What am I doing? Is this even real?" Liam's hand still rested lightly on her waist, the warmth of his touch tethering her to reality while simultaneously pulling her into a hazy dream. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears, chaotic like a war drum. She felt his gaze tracing her face, both gentle and searing, burning away every last shred of her reasoning. From behind, Dylan's arm remained wrapped gently around her, his breath brushing softly against her hair. That familiar closeness overwhelmed her, as if she had belonged to this moment all along without ever realizing it. "Amelia," Liam whispered, his voice soft like a distant echo, yet pulling her back into this reality of passion and longing. Dylan leaned down, his lips close to her ear. "What are you thinking?" he asked, though his voice held a certainty as if he already knew her answer. Before she could speak, she wanted to respond that she didn't know, that she wasn't sure what was right or wrong, her mind a blur, but her heart had already surrendered completely. Liam gently brushed his hand along her cheek, his eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. His touch was tender, but she could feel the fragile restraint beneath it. He leaned closer, their lips nearly touching again. This time, there was no hesitation. His kiss was both strong and soft, as if he were pouring all his unspoken emotions into a silent symphony. She couldn't resist. She let herself be fully consumed by Liam's warmth. Time felt suspended. There was nothing left but the wild rhythm of her heart and the way his arms held her tightly. But she didn't forget that Dylan was still there. He stepped closer, his eyes retaining their playful glint, but now laced with an unfamiliar seriousness and strength. "Don't forget about me, Amelia," Dylan said quietly, his voice low but magnetic. She turned to look at him, and Dylan pulled her into a tight embrace from the front, his gentle smile dissolving every lingering fear within her. She felt the warmth of his chest against hers, his hand softly tilting her chin upward, and then his kiss came like a storm, sweeping away all the boundaries she had once known. Between the two of them, she felt like a sleepwalker, crossing forbidden lines without even realizing it. She was no longer the woman who woke up to lonely, quiet mornings. She was someone new, a woman who craved to live fully, with every emotion she possessed. Liam softly took her hand, pulling her into his arms once more, his gaze locking onto hers, as though he wanted to etch this moment into his memory forever. Dylan stood close, his hand gliding gently along her shoulder, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony meant only for the three of them. Their ragged breaths intertwined in the quiet room, and their touches weren't just physical. They felt like unspoken confessions. The emotion in the room was so overwhelming that she felt like she might melt. She closed her eyes, surrendering to every sensation. She didn't know how much time had passed. All she knew was that she was utterly captivated in their embrace. Yet amidst it all, a small voice echoed in her mind. "Amelia, is this really what you want? What are you doing?" She opened her eyes and saw Liam and Dylan looking at her with eyes filled with love but also a trace of worry, as though they feared she might step away or shatter the moment. But as she met their gaze, she knew she had no regrets. She whispered, her voice soft but resolute, "I've never felt this real before." The room was silent except for their breathing and the pounding of their hearts. She knew that this moment was the point of no return. She had crossed the final boundary, and she didn't want to go back. She leaned into the couch, feeling as though the entire world had shrunk to the warmth of Liam and Dylan on either side of her. Liam gently pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like a silent reassurance. On the other side, Dylan sat close, his eyes reflecting an emotion difficult to name. Tender, a little reckless, but utterly sincere. She tilted her head back and closed her eyes, letting that rare sense of peace flow through every cell of her body. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She belonged to this moment, to their warmth. But when she opened her eyes and looked at Liam and Dylan, a wave of conflicting emotions surged through her. Is this true happiness, or is this just a fleeting escape from the loneliness of reality? Liam softly brushed her hair, his gaze full of affection. Amelia, you don't have to overthink this. Just know that we're here, right beside you. His gentle words were like a lullaby, lulling her into a dream, but they also made her heart tremble with fear. Dylan's familiar low voice broke the silence. Sometimes, we need to live for ourselves, Amelia. Is it wrong to seek a moment that makes you feel truly alive? She turned to look at him, and Dylan's eyes seemed to see straight through her thoughts. But as she faced him and Liam, the invisible fear within her became clearer. She wasn't afraid of them. She was afraid of herself, afraid that these feelings were just a beautiful dream that would vanish with the morning light. She chuckled softly, but there was something lost in that laugh. Dylan furrowed his brow as if he noticed it too. What are you thinking, Amelia? She hesitated for a moment before whispering, I'm not sure. I'm just afraid I'll wake up and everything will disappear like a dream. Liam gently took her hand, his warm fingers enclosing hers as they trembled slightly. It's not a dream, Amelia, he said softly. What you feel is real. Dylan sat down beside her, his gaze more serious than ever. Amelia, we can't replace everything in your life, but the one thing we can do is make sure you know that you don't have to face it all alone. Those words felt like they pierced right through her soul. Suddenly, a tear slid down her cheek. She couldn't remember the last time she had cried. Maybe on one of those lonely nights in this cold apartment when Julian had been away for weeks. The feeling of being loved, being touched, and being understood hit her like a tidal wave, only to be followed by a stillness full of contradictions. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in her life, she didn't want to care about the consequences. Liam gently wiped the tear from her cheek and said softly, Don't think about tomorrow, Amelia. Right now, we're here together. Dylan smiled faintly and added, And that's all that matters. She nodded slightly, letting herself sink into the moment once more, but deep down, she could still hear a voice whispering in her mind. What will happen when the night ends? Will the morning light make everything disappear? She didn't have an answer, but she knew that no matter how this ended, she would always remember this moment. The place where she felt alive and fully loved, no longer the shadow of a forgotten wife in someone else's world. It was in this very moment that she realized she had stepped into a new chapter of her life, and there was no way back to what it had been. The morning light seeped through the thin curtains, stretching across the warm wooden floor. New York City was stirring to life, the sounds of car horns and footsteps rising from the busy streets below, but in this quiet room, time seemed to move at a different pace. Amelia opened her eyes, the soft glow of the sun making her squint against the sharpness of reality. Liam was still lying beside her, his breathing steady like a gentle song, lulling her back to sleep. Dylan leaned against the sofa, his eyes half closed, but she could sense he hadn't fallen into a deep slumber. Her heart tightened as the reality of where she was settled over her in the aftermath of the long night. What have I done? The thought echoed in her mind like a shout in an empty room. She moved slightly, trying not to make a sound, but as she reached for the jacket draped over the chair, Liam opened his eyes. His gaze was still filled with tenderness, but there was something different, no longer the dreamy haze of the night before, but a flicker of unease. Good morning, Liam whispered, his voice husky. Amelia gave a small nod and smiled faintly, but inside she felt a whirlwind of emotions. Dylan shifted and sat upright, his gaze unusually contemplative as he looked at her. Are you okay, Amelia? Dylan asked, as though he was trying to decipher her uncertain expression. She wanted to answer, to say that she was fine, but how could she when she didn't even know how she truly felt? The atmosphere grew heavier as they looked at each other. There were no more innocent smiles, no more playful teasing like the night before, only glances filled with awkwardness. as if they were all struggling to find the right words to break the silence. Liam stepped closer and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Amelia, you don't need to say anything. We all know this is complicated. Dylan stood up, shook out his jacket, and sighed. Yeah, but the only thing I don't want to see is regret in your eyes. Amelia looked at Dylan. His usual mischievous glint was gone, replaced by a rare seriousness. His words felt like a knife slicing through her heart. Regret? She asked herself. Do I regret this, or am I just terrified of these feelings I've never dared to acknowledge? No one said anything else. She stood up and slipped on her jacket, feeling as though she needed to shield herself from their gaze. Liam stepped forward as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated, as though afraid any words would shatter the fragile moment between them. Dylan quietly shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and turned away, as if trying to hide something. The spacious room suddenly felt suffocatingly small. Every glance, every movement seemed to stir up the tangled emotions inside her. She turned away and walked toward the large window, looking down at the bustling crowd below. Life outside carried on as if nothing had happened, but inside her, everything had changed completely. Liam and Dylan stood on opposite sides of the room, like two opposing forces within her soul. She felt as though she was standing in the middle, not just physically, but emotionally. Amelia, Liam spoke again, his voice soft but urgent. You don't have to decide anything right now. Dylan stepped closer but kept a small distance, as though he didn't want her to feel pressured. Take your time, but no matter what, remember, we don't want to see you hurting or filled with guilt anymore. Dylan's words nearly brought her to tears. Everything she had hidden away, the loneliness, the yearning to be loved and understood, was now laid bare in front of these two men in a way that was almost unbearably raw. She turned back to face them. The awkwardness in their eyes wasn't just because of what had happened, it was because of everything left unsaid. Delicate feelings that felt like they could shatter with just one breath. She wanted to say something, but all she could whisper was, I need time. Liam nodded, his gaze as gentle as ever. Dylan exhaled a quiet breath, but he didn't argue or urge her further. The room fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like a necessary pause before they all faced the truth of tomorrow. Amelia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew this wasn't just the end of a long night. It was the beginning of an entirely new chapter in her life. She stood in front of the large window, the skyscrapers in the distance looming like invisible walls encircling the city. The sound of cars and blaring horns echoed outside, but everything felt muffled behind the thick glass. Inside this room, it was just her, Liam, and Dylan, and emotions too complex for words. She clenched her hands together, trying to steady herself. Memories from the night before replayed in her mind like a slow-motion film. The glances, the laughter, the touches that made her heart race. Amelia, you need to do something. Everything has changed forever. Liam stepped closer, his eyes still gentle but filled with worry. He placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice soft but weighted. Amelia, we can't live in limbo forever. You know that, don't you? She looked deeply into his eyes filled with sincerity and love. Dylan stood behind her, his expression no longer playful. Instead, there was a quietness, a fear he tried to hide behind a faint smile. I know, Amelia replied, her voice quiet but steady. Dylan stepped forward, holding her hand in his warm grasp. We don't want you to do anything that will hurt you, Amelia. She felt the sincerity in his words, and it was that very sincerity that made her heart ache even more. She pulled away from their hands and took a few steps toward the center of the room, as if trying to carve out some space for herself. Each step felt heavy with the weight of the emotions she carried. She had lived in loneliness for so many years, and now that she had found the connection she had longed for, she stood at a difficult crossroads. Liam and Dylan, both of them, had made her feel alive in a way she thought she'd lost, but at the same time, she knew that if they continued like this, everything would eventually fall apart, not just for her, but for them too. We can't hide this forever, she whispered, almost to herself. Liam nodded softly. I know. And no matter what you decide, I will always respect you. Dylan stepped closer, his eyes glimmering with a hint of sadness, but still steady with sincerity. You have the right to live by your feelings, Amelia, but the only thing I ask is that you don't live in regret anymore." His words felt like a knife cutting through her soul, but at the same time, they were also a release. She lifted her head, and for the first time in a long while, she felt certain about what she needed to do. She took a deep breath and turned to face them, her voice soft but clear with each word. "I can't live in the shadows anymore. This is no longer a secret, and if we continue like this, we will lose each other." Liam and Dylan looked at her, their eyes filled with understanding and pain. She stepped toward Liam and gently placed her hand on his cheek. "I will always cherish what we have, but now I need to walk my own path." Dylan's eyes locked onto hers, his lips parting slightly as if he wanted to say something, but he stayed silent. She leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. "Thank you for reminding me that I am worthy of love." The room seemed to hold its breath as she took a step back, taking one last look at them before turning toward the door. Liam gave her a small nod, and Dylan stood still, his eyes following her, unable to hide the sadness within them. Amelia opened the door and stepped outside, the morning light casting its glow across her face. The crisp morning air brushed through her hair, but inside she felt a strange warmth, the warmth of freedom, of courage, and of finally facing herself. She walked down the street, the busy crowd rushing past her. She was still Amelia Hayes, but she was no longer the lost woman of yesterday. She had crossed the line, had loved, had made mistakes, and had lived true to her emotions. She didn't know where the future would take her, but she knew that this journey was only just beginning, and no matter what happened, she would never forget these men, the ones who helped her rediscover her true self in this vast world. In her mind, she could still hear Liam's voice. "As long as you live true to yourself, that's already a victory." Amelia smiled softly and walked down the sunlit street, her heart filled with hope for the days to come.